We had a choice set based on that, our budget constraint, and we now have to figure out how our rational agent, Homo economicus, will decide how much rice to buy, how much transport to buy. And we're going to say that they maximize utility. Utility is a strange concept. I'm not arguing that utility is the same for everyone. It might be like some things matter more to me than they matter to other people. Dollar for dollar, it might be an extra car for me is not the same thing as an extra car for Bill Gates. Right. So we have to start remembering that when we use the concept of utility, we are really going to have to dig into this question about what these numbers mean and are they even comparable. Can I compare a number that I give versus a number that someone else gives? So we are in this moment actually making a decision for our class to set aside the question of what is called interpersonal comparisons of utility. I'm not going to go there. We're just going to say that every person has their own metric, whatever it is, where they are making some kind of calculation in their own head about what things matter for them. And so what I'm going to say is the way it works is that you assign some value to rice and some value to transport. And so for rice, it could be that if you had 1 bushel of rice, you would value it at 1,000 utility. If you had 2 bushels of rice, you would value it at 1,800 utility, and so on, right? Similarly, for transport, if you had 1 kilometer of transport, you might value it at 100 utility. If you had 2 of transport, you might value it at 80 utility, 180 utility, and so on, right? So what I'm going to argue is something kind of interesting. Even though I can't actually compare among people, I can make an interesting observation. That for most people, more is better. More transport is better than less transport. More rice is better than less rice. So I'm going to suggest that as you acquire more goods, you usually will have more utility. But the first bushel of rice I get, it might be worth 1,000 to me. The next might be worth, it's still worth more. More is better, right? Still positive. But it might not be worth 1,000. It might be worth 800. So then I would end up 1,800. So the concept of the margin is how much is being added by the next unit of the good. So what I'm going to argue is as you get more and more of a good, the 5th TV is not going to make me quite as happy as the first TV. So the argument is not that that the 5th TV is worth nothing to me, but that the amount of extra happiness I get from the 5th TV, really not that much compared to extra happiness I got when I got that first TV. This is called the law of diminishing marginal utility. That while more is better, it doesn't mean that more is better at a constant rate. That 1 TV makes me happy, 2 TV makes me twice as happy, 3 TV makes me thrice as happy, right? It means that as I keep increasing my consumption, additional units, while they're nice, don't add to my utility as much as early units did. Right? So this is what we're going to call the law of diminishing marginal utility. And this is really important. Before we go any further, we want to ask ourselves a little bit about this law. I absolutely agree. The 5th TV, the 10th Apple, they're not going to make me as happy as the first one. What about healthcare? Is it really true that I go around saying, well, I'm not so happy with the 5th chemo, so I won't really bother with it compared to the first chemo, right? Or I have to take 3 weeks worth of penicillin and week 3 I don't want to do it, right? So there are certain very largely crucial markets in people's lives where we want to ask whether this law is a good way to think about people's decision making. Whether people actually think in for their medical surgery as the 5th versus the 1st, the concept, right? Compared to other kinds of things. So there are going to be crucial markets where we want to consider whether assessing allocative efficiency, whether the resources are going to the right place, based on decision making around the law of diminishing marginal utility, is a good way to think of things. That said, let's not forget, this is actually pretty good for about 80% of our life and decisions. Turns out that remaining 20% is pretty crucial, but when it comes to how do I buy apples and newspapers, and it's a really good way to do things. So now that you've had a chance to think about the concept of utility, it's what you want, and the idea that you will use this as a way to make decisions, we are now going to come to the theory of consumers. And the answer is that pretty much you've got $1,000, right? So we're going to say that what you will do is you will say dollar for dollar, should I buy rice or should I buy transport? So what you've got is you've got a decision between rice and transport. Rice costs $2, transport costs $4. So let's start with the first $4. If in the first $4 you look at $4 and you find that rice gives you more utility, you will buy rice, 2 units of rice. If you find transport gives you more utility, you will buy transport, and you will keep doing this. And so where you end up is the idea that since you are working on the margin, what you are doing is you are looking at the marginal utility, I'm going to call rice X, the first good, divided by the price of X, because that gives me the per dollar utility, right? So if I'm spending $2 on a bushel of rice, and this bushel of rice gives me so much utility, then per dollar, that's the utility I'm getting. And whenever this is bigger than that, I will buy this. Whenever that is bigger than this, I will buy that. And I will keep doing this, and basically where I'll end up is that I will make a decision where both of these are roughly equivalent, dollar for dollar, subject to my budget constraint. Now, we are not going to do it in this class, but we can use this idea basically along with a concept called indifference curves, which is a way to create a visual map of your utility and put it together with your budget constraint. And then use calculus to do your maximization and come up with these formulas. We're not going to do it in this class. We're just going to have that concept in our head. And what we're going to do is when we have income and prices, we're essentially going to ask, when I spend this money, is it worth it to me? MUX over PX. And is it better for me to buy this one? MU versus, is it better for me to buy that one? And so the argument is, this is how consumers make decisions.